And we are back with another podcast episode. And I have a very interesting guest today. So, this is Ryan, and we have been talking for a while on Instagram. And his videos caught my eye because they talk about a lot of the stuff that I have been perceiving, I've been receiving, but I don't see many people talking about these things as openly as I have seen Ryan talk about these things. So, yeah, introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so grateful to have connected with you and to be able to speak with you on this podcast because this is the first podcast that I'll actually be going into these things on. I've done podcasts before, and then I hit a very large bookmark in my spiritual awakening and had to face very deep, heavy, dark things, like you're saying. And so I went through a process of embodying forgiveness throughout that. And I began talking about it on social media, on YouTube. And the main reason why I started talking about it was because I finally felt ready. And I finally felt like I was really embodied in a level of forgiveness and compassion towards everything that I was going to be talking about, that I wasn't going to be perpetuating any of the agendas and any of the victim mentalities per se. And so my entire devotion to being of service is to be as vulnerable as I possibly can around the things that I've experienced and create so much transparency that it allows others to feel that it's okay and it's safe to do that themselves, and that when you are giving yourself that opportunity to speak all of that out, you're creating so much trust in yourself and trust in others because you're getting responses, you're getting reactions, you're getting new people reaching out, such as you. You know, you hit me at a very perfectly aligned time where I needed to hear the messages you were giving me because you were encouraging me to keep speaking, to keep going, because there weren't that many people necessarily in the larger scheme of things viewing the video, but your words were, even if one person receives it, that's a job well done. And so my goal with all of this, going into these dark experiences and speaking on them, is to create that platform for forgiveness and to show that in order to get into the spaces where we're connecting with dragons, we're connecting with these higher elemental beings, we're connecting with the higher levels of source, we have to be grounded in that foundation of sovereignty, of safety. And so I'm here to speak on all of the things I've experienced. I'm here to answer questions, and I've gone through very, very similar awakening patterns and experiences as many other people. And so I won't go too far into the details right now because I know we'll get into it. But I guess I just wanted to state really the awareness that's come from facing these things and the beauty that's come from expressing and from receiving the souls who are also ready for that reception and that resonance.
hmm And that's what really drew me to your videos. Because I remember, I don't even know, like sometimes I'll just click on the hashtags and see, oh, what are people talking about? And I viewed one of your videos, and it was just your pure energy that kind of struck me like, oh, this is somebody that is very balanced, I felt. Because there's a lot of people, they go through experiences and they share, but it is colored with judgment often. And that's their right, of course, they can share, but then you're not really getting a neutral story. And it's like you said, you were at this point I could feel where you are ready to be neutral and to just bring facts. And that's what I thought was really clear. And that's why I immediately said, I'm going to send this guy a message. Maybe weird, but I feel like I have to. And I did. So, and here we are.
And I think that's one of the most important things for people to know, because the fear of speaking those things out is like people are gonna turn on you, you're gonna get judged, you're gonna get shunned, all of the ingrained beliefs around everything that's happened to humans in this current planet cycle and all other cycles. And so that is a residue that we have to deal with, but just the connection that we have made makes it entirely worth it. And it doesn't
Hmm.
even bring into the fact of all of the other connections that I've started making. It's like just one connection from that changes the entire state of your experience, because you're finally feeling seen, you're finally feeling received, and like you're not alone, in that experience of trying to let people know what is going on in this world.
Hmm. And also because I could kind of recognize myself in you, because I remember, when I started talking about some of the stuff that I talk about now, in the beginning, I felt terrified and there was no logical reason, because you're safe in your home. Nobody can harm you, but you still feel terrified
Mhm.
because it's also all these other lifetimes that are coming up where a similar pattern presented itself, like, oh, I'm going to speak about this or this or this, I will get killed, I
Mhm.
will be harmed. And of course now that's not going to happen. Nobody's physically going to come and like cut your head off or hang you or something, but it still feels that way when you
Mhm.
start making these videos.
Mhm. Yeah, and like it's all embedded in our cells. It's all embedded in the structure of the internet, the structure
Mm-hmm.
of the technology that comes from it, because these beings that have perpetuated this consciousness, that have perpetuated the suppression of truth and love, feel that way towards those who step into this space. There are beings who hold the consciousness of complete and total malevolence and resentment. But what you're saying is the complete and total truth, is that your power and your ability to say no and to hold no in those spaces of the thoughts telling you that you're unsafe, that's the power. That's literally the
Mm-hmm.
magical power that you hold in your sovereignty, of speaking no, of saying, no, I don't give permission for these things to happen. And continually facing those, it's like it's just the next part of the process, right? I think of the term new levels, new devils. It's like each time you step up to a new level, the consciousness of a devil matches you. It's there. And so you have to learn how to face that with a deeper heart. You have to learn how to face that with deeper forgiveness and compassion in those places. And then eventually you just get to a state where you're just holding that boundary all the time. And you don't have to put in as much investigative work into discerning who's coming into your field in the way that they are.
Mm-hmm. And it's the first step is the hardest one. All the
Mm-hmm.
steps that follow are always going to be easier, a little bit easier again, and
Mm-hmm.
easier again. Like if, like I'm going to be 38 in a month. If 18-year-old self would have been like, oh yeah, in 20 years, you're going to be talking about angels and dragons and Akashic records and Atlantis and Lemuria and other galaxies and all of that stuff, I would have been like, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
No. And here we are. There's no way that I would have been comfortable at that age, but
Mm-hmm.
you get kind of pushed, and we'll get into that through, like, I guess you could call it an ego death or multiple ego deaths, where it doesn't matter anymore, where the will to share what you know is true matters more than how am I going to be perceived. It just stops mattering when you know that there's this will inside of you to share this information. Like you said, if it helps one person, then you have already done a good job. But it's probably going to help way more people than you even realize. Because
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed, like, you see the numbers of people that follow you, that like, comment. And in reality, there are so many people that will never write a comment, that will never like, that are quietly following you and whose lives you are changing every day, and you will never know their names.
Mm-hmm.
And that is also something that really keeps me going. So that's something that we should keep in our minds too. Like, there's so many people that don't have the courage to be like, or yet that don't yet have the courage to talk about this to the people in their lives, but we're still helping them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think I think you might have been coming and giving me some messages over the last week because that's like literally what I've been receiving and around like even a sense of like the algorithm and like looking at insights and views and stuff like that. It's like the nature is to see the numbers that are being presented and think like, oh, well, those are the exact numbers. Like, what if there's a chance that more people than that have actually viewed the video? What if there's a
Yeah.
chance that you don't even realize the level of vibrational impact that you're having because you're embedded in focusing on what's like presented in front of you? And that's where I think surrendering the fruits of your labor comes into play because we can't perceive the totality of the fruits that we're actually creating. And so if we're trying to figure out and control the outcome of those fruits, then we're actually creating limitation around the
Mhm.
effect that those will have. And so if we're surrendering the fruits, then we're surrendering the control of the outcome. We're knowing that we will experience the fruits, we will experience the outcome, but the treasure is in the process because the process is where, like you're saying, everything starts to get easier. You actually start to find the gold and you actually start to find the rhythm in your ability to tune in and in real time feel emotions come up, feel these things come up and move through them. So the the focus on the outcome is like it's such a distraction to our ability to bloom in the process. And I think that when it's like coming back to the victim mentality. It's like when we no longer feel like we were a victim of these choices is when we are able to start speaking on them from this place because we start to remember that well, we're not at fault and we're not to blame for the things that we experienced. On some level, we agreed to experience that. We agreed at a vibrational level to experience a probability of choices that could manifest through the vibrations that we're holding. And so then we remember how big we are, how powerful we are. And it becomes so much less about what this person did to me and what I experienced in the process and how I'm able to hold that accountability from a state of an open heart.
Mhm. Yeah, that's been my experience too. And like, there's definitely been some people in my life that if I would have chosen to hold on to resentment, stay
Mm-hmm.
in victim mentality, I would still be blaming them for my trauma,
Mm-hmm.
post-traumatic stress, stuff that took me years to work through, that I'm still working through because I'm not perfect. And that's what I also tell people. I am definitely not some elevated, perfect, ascended master. I am just like you. I am just sharing what I'm experiencing so that it can maybe give you some insights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Can you remember times back when you were going through the deep trauma work and coming out of this when you were perceiving things through a victim mentality and that got in the way of like the accuracy of the way that you were perceiving the situation?
Yeah, definitely. In the beginning, well, in the beginning, in my situation, the most traumatic situation in my life, and we'll get into more
Mm-hmm.
details in a little bit. there was definitely a time where I saw how it was everyone else's fault.
Mhm.
And like in it was actually, yes, these people did the things they did, they took the actions that they took. But then I realized, but now I am keeping myself there. They did the things they did, but I'm still angry over stuff that happened months ago, years ago. Why? It's not happening anymore now. And that's when I started shifting. But then I also had a very big reawakening that literally shot me out of my body and made me see things completely differently. And yeah, I
Mhm.
will elaborate in a little bit. But first, let's hear a little bit more about you.
Mhm.
So, what is your story or multiple stories? Because, like in my case, I have subcategories in my whole story. So,
Yeah.
let's just start at the beginning.
Okay. Cool. We'll break it down. So there's multiple facets to how I'm going to explain this because I found out that I was lied to in my childhood about many, many things, and that I was put through traumatic experiences, abuse that I will get into the details of. But this was about 2 years ago. And so this is going to be a multi-dimensional rundown. We're going to go throughout the quantum field of time. And so about 2 years ago is when I had suppressed memories come up of all of these things that happened in childhood. And so I went into a deep space of that was the full dark night of my soul. And so the story up until that point is that I was born in Alaska in 1991. My father was a pilot, and my mother was just kind of like a stay-at-home mom a bit. She had like different jobs. Um, and I lived in Alaska until I was about 2.5, moved to Colorado, got really into soccer. Around 10 years old, my father died. So the story within that space was that he was an alcoholic. He couldn't get a grip on his own demons. He was a pilot for a commercial airline, so he and cargo airlines, and so he would sometimes fly places and be gone for a really long periods at a time. And so I spent a lot of time with Nancy, is who I'll call her, who was my mother that I thought at the time, and my father, they separated when I was 10, and he died very suddenly. And it was made the way that it happened was that he had a heart attack in his apartment when he they separated, and he died in a shower. And so went through at 10 years old this whole grief process of that, and really didn't like move through it. Like it was just very much holding on to everything and feeling like I was responsible for everybody else's feelings. And so that was the large like wedge in my heart throughout growing up. And so once I got to end of high school, I wasn't feeling school. I didn't vibe with the school vibes, but I felt like I needed to go to school, just forced. And so I took some years off, but this is when I started really getting into like heavy drinking, and taking a lot of drugs. And I started to go to music concerts and electronic shows, um, and with a bunch of friends. And so I really got into like that space of like partying, taking drugs. Um, and eventually I got addicted to Xanax for about 6 months. Got off of that and had a seizure like a couple days after I stopped taking it. And this seizure connects back to these experiences that I had as a child. And so I was in this space of like I was just that person. I didn't know what I was doing with my life. I didn't have any sort of direction. All of the people around me were going to school. They seemed like they had like visions and kind of purposes for their life. And so right around this time with the Xanax, I got involved with a music company and a record label, promotion company out here in Colorado. And so I started working on the business side of music, and I started doing that out here, and it put me more into the party space, put me more into um, just masking everything with drinking and taking drugs. And so went through some rough times there, almost got fired because I was not having control of my drug use. And then moved to New York because a bunch of stuff happened with this guy at the company. Continued the job out there. And once I moved to New York is where I really got out of my bubble. It's where I really started realizing, like, hey, I need to get healthier. And right before I moved out there, I stopped drinking. And so I was just getting in that space. And I started focusing on diet, on exercise, not spirituality yet. And so I continued kind of like hitting bumps in the road with alcohol where I would, binge drink and just get, that was my issue, was I wouldn't drink like every day, but when I would drink, I would just get really drunk and get really messy. And I would even do this like in backstage areas at music shows, like in representing the company, like I would have issues with holding myself. And so I continued to go through these processes in New York while I worked in the music industry. And I found a partner out there. We worked at the same company, lived in the same house, ended up coming together. Um, we split up when she left the company, and this is when I decided to go into a spiritual path. And so this is right around 2018 ish, and started going to therapy, but I only went about 4 times because I just wasn't meshing with the woman who was giving the therapy. And so I started doing float tanks and sensory deprivation tanks, and looking into my trauma on my own. I was listening to podcasts of people who had done this before, and so I was looking into trauma on my own. I started getting into meditation slowly. It was the slowly stepping into the spiritual awakening, and I did that because I had a panic attack, which caused me to realize like I need to go to therapy. Set me on this journey, and I was in the space doing breath work, doing these different things, and then COVID happened. And it was right when these George Floyd riots happened out here in America. I think it was like May of like 2020, maybe. I could be wrong about that, 2019 or 2020. But it was when um, yeah, they like social media had this, music industry had this blackout. And so everybody posted all of these. It was just like a black page for George Floyd. And I was very much identified in like a democratic place at that point. And my friend was like, "Hey, are you seeing what's going on with this? Like, do you understand what they're doing with this blackout thing, with like what could be happening behind these riots?" Like, and I didn't. He's like, "Okay, I think you need to look at some stuff." And he sent me a video, and it was this woman, this old woman in a gas station in Brooklyn talking about Joan Rivers being a reptilian. And it just like turned something on in me. It was that feeling of like truth just turning on. And so from there I got thrust into all of that, into the darkness. I was very into writing screenplays ahead of that. And so I would get downloads for stories and then turn it into a screenplay. And I got a download about this whole story of like the president knowing that there's an alien invasion and that he's not telling people, and that there's these like intergalactic beings fighting with each other. And I was like, cool, this is a really cool story. Like, I'm going to write this. And then I came across an article at that time after seeing the video of David Wilcock talking about um, this intergalactic war. And it was exactly what I had gotten in the download. And so that then made me realize, like, okay, I was getting something sent to me. Like someone was telling me something that was going on. And it was around the time with Trump and all of that and the president. And so I just was thrust into human trafficking, into satanic abuse, into all of it, every single thing that you could think of. it was like my intuition would just pull me into these rabbit holes online, and I would see threads and threads of like these all of these things being proven, and it was right before the censorship was really turned on. And so I was in states of like shock, states of like it was very difficult to deal with at first, very very difficult, because now I know I had experienced those things, and that's why I was magnetically pulled just like so fast to them. And so I went through a bunch of experiences in there, which I've talked about on my YouTube. Happy to go into more details here about getting attacked by, a red dragon that was presenting itself as being beneficial, but making me feel like I was schizophrenic. And then I had someone tell me there was an entity on me, teach me how to release it. And then that same person's sister, a few weeks later, channeled into me, and my Andromedan self came through and told me a message about frequencies and harmonics, and about how I am a harmonic organizer in the universe. And so it was just everything like dominoes, just like one after another. um and so I was learning about channeling, listening to different people channel, and then I started a community called Fit for Service, which is run by Aubrey Marcus, and he's on Instagram. And that was just like the most beautiful experience I'd ever had, because it was like the full feeling of being seen and felt in a community, having a retreat where you're doing workshops together. I came away with it having experiences where the Pleiadians came through and they talked to us clearly for the first time, me and my friends who I met there, who are now my lifelong, multi-lifelong friends that reconnected. So I was thrust then into the beauty of it, into the beauty of the age of Aquarius, of the communities, of the relationships. And so I was in that community for the next few years and continued to go through like deep shamanic initiations and awakenings in that community. And right at the time when I got married is when these suppressed memories came up. And so that was 2021. And these suppressed memories told me that I that this woman, Nancy, was not actually my biological mother. She was my stepmother and my handler, and that I had had mind control experiments done on me, military level mind control experiments. Um, that my father was actually involved in these deep state organizations on a positive level, but because of his involvement, this is how they got to me. And so I was thrust into this whole space of having to deal with this really on my own. And I didn't want to go to a therapist or go to these other things, because I knew at that point what society was like. I knew the types of diagnoses, the all of the that stuff. And so I was like, I need to take care of this myself. I had friends who were healers, who very, very good healers, who helped me, who I was working with, actually her when I first got these memories. And so she helped me through that kind of beginning phase of being able to like trust myself, because she didn't tell me. I was asking her, I was like, these things are happening. I need to know what's going on. I need to know the truth. And she was like, I can't I can't do that for you. I can't confirm whether this is true or not. Like you have to do that on your own. And it was the best gift that she could have given me. And so since then, I've been head on investigating my family, understanding the truth of my biological mother, her involvement in all of this, and the depth of, yeah, the relationship with Nancy's family and kind of their history, and how it connects into all of these galactic perspectives and all of these interdimensional conflicts that we have been we're uncovering, that we're facing right now. And so that's it in a nutshell. And from there, I think there are some nice avenues that we can then go down.
That was yeah, very insightful. And I think it is real easy to think you're crazy when you start having these suppressed memories because nobody's talking about it. But there are definitely more people that are experiencing this.
Mhm.
because we are going through this global awakening. The frequency is rising, which means suppressed memories of a lower frequency will come up for
Mhm.
more people. And I feel this may be just an intuitive download that you are one of the first to speak on this, but you're definitely not going to be alone. There's going to be more and more people,
Mhm.
and they're going to be encouraged by people like you, people finding this podcast, your videos, and they're going to be, they may even be triggered by some of the stuff you're saying, and then they're going to start to like see their own memories again. And I think that's how it is for a lot of us. We are triggered by something we hear or see somewhere, and then we think, oh, we're making this up. We are just fabricating things in our minds, but that's not how it is. It's
Mhm.
you are opening a little door, and all of a sudden you open this Pandora's box, and all this stuff just comes flooding out, and there it is.
Mhm.
That is actually what's going on.
That's spot on and exactly how it happened for me. By the time I had the experience of the memories coming up, I was already going through deep intuitive training. I was learning how to get communication from my higher self, my soul, like very clear communication. I was learning how to be in my body and feel different parts of my body in terms of the trauma and the consciousness. And so it was like I was preparing myself for that moment. And then once I got married, it was like my heart kind of finally had this connection. There was like a commitment that was there. Um, and it like activated a new level of my heart. And so I think I was able to finally just receive that. And like you're saying, like it was quite literally Pandora's box. I did not move through this smoothly from the start. It was I was in complete and utter denial for the first at least like 3 days probably, because there was a lot of pain. I was doing an anger release ceremony and I had a bunch of pain come up in my body, and it was really really intense pain, and I was guided not to go to an urgent care or go to a doctor and to just be with it. And so that's where I started asking questions, and I started asking what this pain was from, why it was coming up. And so I received answers such as Nancy's not my biological mother, etc. And for the first few days, my mind felt like it was splitting in two. Like I was not accepting what was being told to me at all. I was trying to find every sort of avenue to talk my way out of it, to tell me that this is actually manipulating me, that like something's telling me, I was getting flashbacks to that red dragon and the schizophrenia type episodes of something feeding me completely false information. And so that was an experience. Like I was fully splitting in two. And and I literally felt it was like if this goes further, I might actually have to go to a mental hospital. Like I might not know what to do and I might actually snap. And so my only option at that point was to accept what my soul and my higher self was telling me and what these memories were showing me. And as soon as I did that, it mended, and it was splitting and it came back together. And then I started having the body experiences. I started having the visceral experiences of having a memory, getting a visual, and then having energy come up out of my body and having to throw up or having to purge or having to cry, and getting tremors, having to lay down in bed, heat and hot and cold, all of that stuff. But then once I started accepting it and I started doing like the intuitive investigation around it, exactly like what you're saying was happening. There were people who had experienced these things that my intuition, the videos clicked in, and I would find people who experienced deep space, secret space programs and enslavement and satanic ritual abuse, and like even Kaya Ra and the Sophia Code. Like in the audiobook, I don't know if she does it in the physical book, but she talks about her how she went through human trafficking as well, and that she's had to go through that and deal with that. And so once you start accepting it, then the universe is like, here, like, look, like there are other people going through this. Oh, and there's this guy named Nathan Reynolds who I came across recently, and I just want to give him a shout out. I'm pretty sure that's his last name, and we'll correct it if it's not. He's been on a podcast of the Confessionals where he talks about being born into the same types of family programs that I experienced. And so he talks about these military programs and from a very young age being put through black magic ceremonies and communing with like dogmen and werewolf type entities and being put through assassin programs and all of these things that are connected to deep underground military bases. And so once you're able to really accept like the vastness of this web that has tried to like embed itself in you, then it's just dominoes. It's just all there. And it really starts showing up in the perfect timing for you to receive that type of confirmation that you're perceiving truth through what you're receiving.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle, and all the puzzle pieces come at the
Yeah.
perfect time, and it just fits together because you're constantly trying to tell yourself that you're crazy. But
Mm-hmm.
these puzzle pieces fit so perfectly, they fit way better than anything that you could have ever fabricated. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot deny it anymore when you see it.
Mm-hmm. Have
And
you
yeah,
do you feel
yeah, sorry.
like I feel like that's the biggest aspect of my discernment process. And that's what's showed me where my discernment is true is like the confirmation I get from synchronicity. It's like I'll hold discernment, I'll hold information, and then I'll receive information multiple days later, weeks, even months later. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like that's exactly what I was discerning. That's exactly the way that I was feeling. And so then I use that as the scientific indicator. It's like that's the feeling that I need to remember when I'm discerning. And that's the feeling that I need to be constantly working through to then be able to get into the space of just knowing, like, when this person's in front of me talking, saying something, they're actually embodying something different. And now I just trust that discernment. So it's like, oh, yeah, this person's clearly connected into that, very clearly connected into that. And they're pretending like they're not. To whereas before it would be a process. It was like, I think I'm feeling this. I'm pretty sure that I'm feeling this from there. Can I receive guidance to get confirmation that that's happening? And then
Mm-hmm.
I would receive some form of multi-dimensional guidance in that way.
Yeah, yeah, because it gets easier and easier to recognize
Mm-hmm.
your own intuitive voice.
Mm-hmm.
It gets easier, and there's always like clutter going on around us.
Mm-hmm.
And we are not raised to be tuned in to that voice. We're being raised to be tuned in to the experts, the external authority figures, blah, blah, blah. So it is a whole process of ungaslighting ourselves because we are like, oh, I cannot trust myself. I'm not an expert on myself. I'm not an expert on mental health. I'm not an expert on my body. I'm not an expert on anything.
Mm-hmm.
So you automatically think, oh, I cannot be trusted.
Mm-hmm.
But your body, it's like you said, once you accepted all that stuff, suddenly you have the physical experiences, you have the post-traumatic stress symptoms, basically a delayed reaction because your body was in just paralysis. You went through the experience, but because it was so traumatic, your body said, we have to survive. We cannot process any of this right now. We're going to store it for later. And then you came to a point where you were able to relax so much that the body was like, oh, yeah, now here's all this stuff from 20 years ago. You can deal with this now. That's
Yeah.
exactly what happened to me. And yeah, it's like typical just shock. You experience physical shock, throwing up, migraine attacks with vomiting. And I'm like, what is happening? And memories coming back while I was having the migraine attacks, all this. And I'm like, this is like your body is telling you, trust what you feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's so many people that think I'm going crazy, this isn't normal, what is happening? And
Mm,
the body is really good at protecting itself, at protecting you. And that's what's happening. And we have stuff, so much stuff stuck, like people that have shoulder issues, hip issues, all these physical things that are often just energy that is stuck from unprocessed things, whether it's from this lifetime, other lifetimes. And so, yeah, we have to be
mm,
really willing to bring everything into the body, because and I know I'm getting a little sidetracked. It's trendy to be like, oh, we're so spiritual. Let's go up in the clouds and be channeling and detached from the body. But then you're not really embodying all of that stuff.
Well, I think that's so spot on, and it's such an important factor of the relationship that I created with my body going through that process. Like the 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 depth of connection that I feel with my body now after going through that, like the long windows of purging, having 2 weeks where you're like feeling sick and throwing up and all of that. Like afterwards, it's like I feel so connected to the earth. I feel so connected to the trust within my body that it can get this stuff out. And like you're saying, we're so trained to just project into the expert. It's like if we're feeling this way, oh, we're sick. We have something wrong with us. We need to go to the doctor. We need to have all this medical insurance. Like we need to have these things to make sure the what ifs, like the what ifs. And it's like through this
Mm-hmm.
process, I don't have health insurance, and I haven't had health insurance for the last year and a half because I started trusting my body and source so much that I was like, I don't even need this anymore. Like these what if scenarios, like they're not existent in my life, but it's because I put that trust in my body, and I put that connection into the guidance of the body. And back to what we've talked about with people who are channeling and bringing through information, like that's the core issue, that's the core chasm, schism, the crack, the crevice. It's like it's not in their body. There's a psychic wound that is creating a physical wound that is then bringing through cluttered information, cluttered thoughts, cluttered emotions. And so all of that is because we've lost trust with our body entirely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that reminds me, like you'll see these memes often online, like, and they mean it's not like bad. They don't mean it in a bad way. They try to be funny, but it's like, oh yeah, come pick me up, spaceship. I'm here. Bring me
Mm-hmm.
back home. Like, no, the Earth is your home. Your physical body is made from the Earth. You are requested by planet Earth to be here. You are made of her body.
Mm-hmm.
You're basically here to help her ascend, and you are contributing. You are a cell of the bigger whole. And that's why we came here in this body. So, and that's why I'm also like, hey, I'm also a human being, and I'm going to enjoy as much as I can from this earth experience
Mm-hmm.
and try to bring the higher realms down into the earth. That
Mm-hmm.
is what we should really be doing. And the channeling, it's all great. But at the same time, like that's how I see them when I'm channeling other beings. They're like, oh my God, it looks like so much fun on Earth. They are so intrigued by planet Earth, by the human experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And we take that for granted. We take that, like you're saying, the joking, the desire to be picked up to go home. It's like it's the it's the effect of the victim mentality. It's the effect
Mm-hmm.
of not fully accepting that you chose to be here in this body and that you chose to feel the things that you're feeling. You chose to move through these things. And that that is one of the biggest things I've noticed when working with people around like purpose and mission. And it's like they make it so complex. They try and make this mission idea and this purpose like so yeah, it's just complex. It becomes projecting into the future, building businesses and building these material things, and that's beautiful, and that will come and that will happen, but that can only come to full fruition when you're in your purpose of your body, when you're in the purpose of your heart, and you have become the embodiment of your higher self. Really, that's what we're going for, right? It's the bringing the higher self continually down into the body, because the higher self has been seen as, a sixth dimensional version of you. It's a version of you that's in the future, in the future. But what is the future? It's all happening simultaneously. So we can tune into that sixth dimensional version of ourselves. We can embody that sixth dimensional version of ourselves. And through the accumulation of all the embodiment of our soul records, then we become that embodiment in this life. We become that collection of all of the different wisdoms and aspects that we've brought through in all of our other memories. But that can't happen if we're not in our feet. And when this first started happening to me, when I was going through these large purging processes, these all of this stuff, that was my biggest realization first. I was like, oh my God, I haven't been in my body as nearly as much as I thought that I was. Like, it was a completely different feeling, completely different clarity. And that is the guiding factor that also came with the discernment. It was like, is this bringing me more into my body? Is this bringing me more into the heart open state? Or is this taking me into somewhere else? Because where I'm trying to go is the body, where I'm trying to go is the heart. And so that, as the guiding compass for the discernment, was the full thing that allowed me to get through all of this.
Yeah. And I think when people start exploring spirituality or meditation, astral traveling, all of these things, as a result of being unhappy or a catalyst event, something, a traumatic event, it can go two ways.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm constantly trying to raise awareness of. Make sure that you are not doing it to escape, to get away from the pain, to detach from the body, to travel to the nice places, to travel to the nice spheres that you encounter when you're meditating. It's great, but don't do it just to escape, because then you're going to get like the oh, love and light. Don't get angry ever. Don't dwell on being sad. But sometimes when you get the feeling of grief, anger, don't escape it. Just be like, oh, this is interesting. Don't identify with it, but say, I am willing to feel this because I'm going to investigate this. What is actually your real name? What is your origin? What are
Mm-hmm.
you here to show me? There, it's basically a teacher at that point. And then you can say, okay, where are you located in my body? You may suddenly become aware of this knee that's been bothering you for months. Or you may become aware of this migraine that you're constantly taking pills for. And then you can actually do something with this spiritual download. You can bring it in your body and it can actually heal your now experience. And that's how we bring this higher self down,
Mm-hmm.
by dissolving energy that is of a lower frequency, if you
Mm-hmm.
want to put it that way. Because also, okay, positive, negative, good, bad, we like to label things, but all of these things are here for the expansion of source energy in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Even the people that harmed us, the people that we have soul contracts with that did stuff to us, that we can say, you did this to me, now because of you I'm traumatized or whatever. Yes, these people did those things, but on a soul level, and I know I'm getting sidetracked, on a soul level, these people are our best friends, because they said, I'm going to take this upon myself, like I'm going to do this to you so that you can grow from it.
Mm-hmm. And when
And
we go
that's not a
over,
popular opinion.
I know it triggers people so much. And that's the state of getting through the victim mentality, I think, is like realizing like when we go further and further in, up, whichever direction you want to say, we become the same soul eventually. We become the same oversouls. We become the same being. And so I've seen so many times where Source has given me a vision where it's like this oversoul is choosing for both this person and this person over here. One of them's positive and one of them's negative, but because the oversoul has the same desire, they're working in harmony on a certain dimensional level to make that desire come to fruition. And that desire is inherently positive because it's at that level of the oversoul. So remembering that, like you're saying, and that's the forgiveness. Like we are all a family. This is family drama that we're a part of. And so just recognizing that, like knowing that we are all brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm. And then people will ask me, like, how can you forgive them? They did this or this to me. How can I forgive them?
Mm-hmm.
And then I give them the story that I just told you, like on a soul level, we all chose this, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, so you're telling me that you're never angry. You don't ever feel anger. I said, that's not what I said.
Mm-hmm.
I said the higher level of understanding of me, that part that understands all of that, knows exactly why that person did that to me, what my lesson is. Am I allowed to still feel mad about that? Yeah, but I'm going to put that anger into perspective and I'm going to say, this is my human reaction. I'm experiencing anger, grief, betrayal, pain, abandonment, whatever. And that is what I feel on a human level.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the soul level that also understands why they did things that they did, because the result of that in my case is that I went through a massive awakening and I stepped fully into my purpose and helped a bunch of people with my experiences. And then on the soul level, I'm thanking that other person's higher self, saying thank you, high five,
Yeah.
because I'm helping a bunch of people. But the human level is like not in a fluent communication with that person, and we're not best friends. But on the higher levels, I am sending gratitude
Mm-hmm.
and I am thankful for the experience. And that
Exactly.
is just the whole process. When stuff happens, that is the whole process that you have to go through. And that's how you reach enlightenment, how you reach these higher spiritual levels of understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly how I feel about what I've gone through as well. The gratitude that I have for it is it's another level. It's a complete other level because this is lifetimes upon lifetimes of work. This is lifetimes upon lifetimes of research and investigation into the mind, into what's actually going on in these other dimensions, and all of these things. And so the idea of like all we have to do is move through the lower vibrations in order to get there, that also triggers people too because it's so simple. And so what do you have to do to move through the lower vibrations? You have to feel them. You have to feel them and let them move through. And it's that simple. And so people get so caught up in just like in that aspect as well, like being so afraid to feel, so afraid to just feel something, even though we know we're going to be safe on the other side. And just always bringing it back down to that simplicity of allowing yourself to feel it, of allowing yourself to let it move through. Because that's the basis of the issue. We just haven't felt it. It's all unprocessed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it is triggering for people. And then, yeah, that's also like another meme that I come across a lot, like, oh, I must have been drunk when I signed my soul contract, or what did I write down on my contract? That's
Yeah.
crazy. But you did all because you knew that on a soul level you were able to do it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You're
So,
capable.
yeah. And what you said earlier, something before I forget, like, yeah, it's like a process of lifetimes sometimes, and lifetimes, like in my situation, maybe this is a good moment to kind of go deeper into my story, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Um, Let me just start at the beginning, like you did. So I was actually a psychic child, and I had very psychic dreams. I had a lot of out of body experiences. I remember when I was 6 years old going out of my body, and I kept going up. And I kept going up and up and up, and I reached this golden light. And it was not blinding, but it was just very bright. And I'm like, ah, and I was becoming more abstract and less of an identity the closer I got to the light. But then there was like this thing that said, oh, no, you have to go back. And I fell back in my body. And I remember I fell out of my bed and I was just laying there like, what just happened? What? But it also was like this the most pure feeling of love. And I knew like, oh, I went home or something. And I kept having psychic experiences, could feel people's energy. I saw angels. But of course, when you tell people, they're like, oh, you're making things up, you're lying. So you start to believe that you're crazy, that you're lying. But then my mom had a spiritual awakening and she got into self hypnosis, meditation. She took a channeling course and she taught me and my brother automatic writing and channeling. So we were channeling at age 9 and 12. Me and my brother were doing automatic writing and we're talking to our spirit guides. And Archangel Michael starts talking to me, and I'm like thinking, oh, I cannot talk to this about this to anyone. They're going to think I'm crazy because I was like 12, 13. Kids in my class were talking about movies in the theater, about all kinds of other stuff, music. And I'm there like, oh, I had a chat with Archangel Michael before I went to sleep. So you can't really talk to people about any of that. And then I kept on doing I had a little journal, like my automatic writing journal, and I would have my little angel conversations every day. And then when I was around 18, I was like, I'm done. I'm done with this. I want to fit in. And I tried to pretend that it was all in my head. But for years, they kept pushing me. They're like, it's real. It's not in your head. Like I would see lights going on and off in the house. There was wind making towels move and all the windows were closed. Feathers on my pillow with there's no window in the room. Stuff like that was happening. And that's when I got this tattoo with the feather because I
Beautiful.
still felt like, oh, they're still watching over me, even though I don't want to, I was rejecting them completely and rejecting myself basically completely. And so then I met, that had to happen looking back. I had to completely detach from my intuition. And then I met my ex husband. And if my intuition would have been intact, I would have never married that man. But I was supposed to marry him. And yeah, it was basically a very toxic relationship, abusive relationship. And I just became this shell of myself completely. He was a master manipulator, knew brainwashing techniques, hypnosis techniques, knew exactly what to say, like keywords, trigger words to make me behave basically in ways that like I was so dissociated from myself that I was just existing, kind of. Where am I?
Mm.
Anyway, so then I knew that I had to get out of that marriage. But in my mind, I was stuck forever. There was no getting out of that because he would also always repeat and program me and say, you cannot go anywhere. Like basically, you cannot go. And I could walk out the door and I could just be gone. But when you are in that state, you are not going to because you are so convinced that you're going to die. So I was not leaving. I could have easily left. I never did. And then, oh, I forgot something. So when I was a child, I had dreams too of my teachers being attacked by big crocodile beings that were walking upright. Now I know they're reptilians. So that's what I would dream. And my
Interesting.
teacher in my dream was looking into my eyes and calling out for help. And I was standing there like, huh, what is happening in the dream? She's being like grabbed by her leg and pulled across the ground by this crocodile type of man. And then the next day in school, I'm seeing this teacher and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, did she have the same dream? Should I say something about it? But I was 6 years old. I'm thinking, oh, I'm not going to say anything. She's going to think I'm crazy.
Mhm.
Now I know that she was probably experiencing some kind of an attack in the astral, and somehow on some level I was picking up on it. Anyway, fast forward to me and my ex-husband, and I start having sleep paralysis, and I start experiencing attacks from beings that feel negative. And so I'm still not back like doing the whole psychic thing because I'm still rejecting all of that. But then it starts presenting itself to me, forcing itself upon me again. And what also starts happening is like Jesus references everywhere, like stories about Jesus. And I'm like, I don't want to hear about Jesus. I'm also rejecting the church. I'm like rejecting all of it. And so that one night, I had a sleep paralysis attack, and there is this gigantic reptilian, not a crocodile, but a man with crocodile features, but way taller than a normal human, like 7 to 8 feet tall. And he's pinning me on the bed, and I'm paralyzed. And all of a sudden, I don't know where it came from. I just say, Jesus, or like help or something, and I just call upon Jesus, and suddenly it's gone. The energy shifted, the being is gone, and I'm sitting on my bed like, what just happened? I called Jesus and the thing disappeared. So I'm like, I need to look into this. And that is basically how I dove into Jesus again and discovered all of the Gnostic teachings, the Essene teachings, and the true story of Yeshua.
Mhm.
So that's how I dove into all of that. And where was I? This is such a long story. Oh, yeah. Then my ex-husband. So I'm in the process of leaving. And I know, but this is like a 2-year process because I know I have to be careful. I cannot just walk out the door. It was a psychological process and a physical process of detaching from this connection. So I'm starting to go through this awakening. My gifts are starting to come back, and I'm starting to have psychic experiences. I'm starting to have ETs that come to me and that are like I had one other experience when I was on the couch with my ex and his mother. And they also had a very toxic connection, and they started screaming at each other, and I'm in the middle. I'm sitting in the middle, and I'm getting very overwhelmed, and I start getting a panic attack from them yelling at each other. And I'm sitting there like, help. I'm just calling help. And suddenly my guide, my Syrian guide, who I now know is basically my Syrian self, is standing behind me and doing stuff to my crown chakra. And I feel instantly calm. And she's saying, I'm here to help you with your central nervous system. You will be okay. And she's telling me this like whole download of what she's doing with my energy. And I'm like, okay, whatever. This is nice. And I just don't hear them anymore. They're yelling. And then I started connecting with Sirius in the sky. I installed the star map, start looking at the star of Sirius in the sky, and I start channeling. I start getting this information. And at the same time, my ex-husband, around that same time, we're having a conversation, and I'm already mentally leaving. I'm already in the process of, okay, I'm preparing to leave. And he turns to talk to me, and suddenly I'm like, it was like a time warp, and everything changed, and the room shifted, and it looked like a Celtic roundhouse. It didn't look like the room anymore. and I look at myself and I'm wearing all different clothing and I have like this druid outfit on and my hair is different and I have like these bronze pins and jewels on and he looks different. He looks like some kind of war chief and like with all this Celtic stuff that he's wearing, and there's other people. And in that moment, I knew the whole context of what was happening, and it was basically an overlap with another timeline, another lifetime where we were together, and something triggered it so that those timelines collapsed in that one moment, and I saw both of them.
Wow.
Like how you have Photoshop and you can click on the layers. That's kind of what happened. And so that was the first spontaneous Akashic Records experience. And I start Googling. I'm like, when that was over, I start Googling, okay, because I got this whole download of, yes, this is the year 365 in Scotland, that location, blah, 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 that was going on. So I Google everything. I start researching because I'm trying to prove that I'm insane. So I'm like, okay, all of this stuff is adding up. This is exactly how people dressed. Started looking into like tribal laws of the area, and everything matched with everything I saw. And he was some kind of warlord, a warlord, and I was a druid. And the funny thing is that he kind of had a similar role in this lifetime. He was into like some illegal things. I'm not going to get into detail, but like there were so many overlaps. I'm like, this, I cannot make this up.
Mm-hmm.
Then I saw my daughter there, what she was doing there. And then it became clear you have to leave. Like this was the contract. I was shown this because it's been going on for lifetimes. That's what I was getting at. Basically, this is a thing, a vow that my soul took together with his soul way back in that other lifetime. And now I finally had the chance to break free from that connection because I was learning the lesson and I saw it. I saw everything all of a sudden, saw that I was in a trauma bond, how I was being manipulated. I saw all the attachments, how he had me basically trapped in this web. And it just, yeah, that's basically what catapulted me into this whole higher understanding. And I had an awakening, like an entire Kundalini awakening, because in that moment, I felt like from the base of my spine, like suddenly this energy burst just shooting through my crown. And then he already left because I think, I don't know how, I managed to keep this conversation going while I was having this crazy experience. He walks out the door, and I have this entire like DMT trip in my brain that just happened. And I understand everything, who we are as souls, how our soul family is connected, what the lessons were, the contract, blah, 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 everyone involved, their role, other lifetimes, overlaps. And I'm standing there and my mind is just exploding. So that all needed to unfold for like about 9 months. I had to put all those puzzle pieces together. And that was the beginning of my work. That's how I developed my Akashic Records work, because I started reversing the process. I said, if I can spontaneously have these experiences, how can I trigger them? How can I call these experiences to me and dive into other timelines and get the information and find some kind of a tactic that works into opening up this information in a structured way so that I can control it, so that I can steer the ship. So I started experimenting with it with my own lifetimes. And then I started doing it with like friends and people that wanted to volunteer. And once I felt comfortable enough, I started offering this to people because like it was 9 months and I thought I'm crazy. Like I definitely had a few moments where I was also like, I need a doctor because this is, I am bipolar or schizophrenic. This is not normal. I'm my brain is broken from all the trauma that I thought my brain is just broken. But yeah, so that's kind of my story. And then 2 years, so that all happened in 2016, 17, all of that. Then in 2000, the end of 2017, beginning of 2018, I started really offering my services. And then 2 years ago, I had a near death experience.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, on top of all that. So, and what happened then, because that was exactly 2 years ago, around this time, the beginning of September. And I was actually gone for 2 minutes, for almost 2 minutes. And yeah, I remember just fading away. And I've fainted in the past, and when you faint, you can still hear stuff and you're still aware. It was like the plug was unplugged. It was just, apparently people were screaming, all kinds of stuff. I couldn't feel, I was not in my body. I was just gone. So I went back to that light that I went to when I was 6 years old. And I remember thinking again, like I'm fading away, like my identity is going away. I'm not me. Oh, I have children. Oh yeah. I don't, like, you know that they're there, but you are not identifying with the person of like Deborah. Oh yes. Oh yeah, whatever, but I'm here now or something. And then there was something that brought me back, like a voice. I started hearing my daughter's voice, and I'm being sucked back into my body, and I feel a hand on my chest, and I feel the back of the chair that I'm sitting in. And suddenly I went, and I was back. And what also happened is there were just all these golden angels, and they said, "We are the seraphim, we are here, we are your family, you are one of us, you are originally a seraphim." And I'm like, whoa, okay. And I'm just accepting all of this because I'm dead. So I'm like, fine, I'm back. Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
This is good. Like, it's maybe a little silly, but that's how it felt. Just home. It felt like home and peace. And then I came back. And for the first 2 weeks, it felt like I was in a hologram. Everything, like, I also had in that moment a walk-in experience. It's not really a traditional walk-in like how most people explain it, that they have a whole other soul coming. The way I was shown was like a recycling of energy. Like, you have your whole energy, let's say it's not in your body, it's higher, so it's somewhere up there. And because this part of me that was here was like a saturated sponge almost, that held so much trauma, that it had to go up. And that's what happened. It was an exchange almost. And a new part of me, a higher frequency part of me, came down into my body. And it almost felt, the first couple of weeks, it felt like a baby that's experiencing everything for the first time, but in my body. So everything was very bright, noises were very loud, and all my senses were so much sharper, and the way I did my readings completely shifted. Like, I didn't need to tune in. Everything was just happening super fast. And that's also when the dragons were starting to present themselves way more, the angels, the seraphim, and they basically became my main guides at that point. So yeah. But I've been working with the dragons since 2017, when I was in the process of leaving my ex. And I remember one experience. I didn't know anything about dragons. I didn't know. I'm just meditating because I was into meditation, and I knew I have to leave. And I was just calling upon help, guidance. And suddenly I'm in a cocoon of something warm, and I felt like a body heat almost, from another being coming off of this cocoon and just filling me with love. And I looked, but my eyes were closed. But in this meditation, I saw wings with like veins in them, and they were like illuminated. And that's when I knew these are gigantic dragon wings, and they are wrapped around me. And that's when my dragon guide, this one here, he introduced himself and he said, I'm going to help you get through this experience. You're not alone. And I'm
Mm.
like, what? Dragons? Dragon guides? What? And so, yeah, I think that's kind of my story.
I love
Okay.
I love it. Did you um what was that process like of leaving the abusive relationship? Like was it just like you planned it for like a day, like a certain day and then you just made it happen on that day or like what was that like?
Yeah. So that is definitely something I needed to be very careful
Mhm.
because I felt that if I was lying, he would know.
Mhm.
And then we have not even gone into the reptilian aspect of the whole thing. Because in all of that psychic stuff that was going on, I started recognizing star lineages in people. I could see a person, and because I was working so closely with my Syrian self, she started saying basically like it was like gifts that started getting activated. I could look at a person and see, oh wow, there's a ton of Lyran energy, there's a ton of Pleiadian energy in you or something, and like I could immediately spot reptilians,
Mhm.
and because I suddenly recognized them, and so I looked at my ex-husband and I just saw him for who he was.
Mhm.
I completely saw who he really was, and that was a reptile disguised as a human, and it all made sense.
Mhm.
Like he loves snakes, he loves reptiles, and all of this, like, and they have, like, now too, when I see a person, it's like there's just a cold metallic presence and a cold stare.
Mhm.
And the energy is very, it's almost like somebody is putting a very heavy slimy layer on top of you, and it's like they're very telepathic,
Mhm.
so they can tell when you're onto them.
Mhm.
And I was constantly like, I have to pretend that I don't know what he is.
Mhm.
I have to pretend that I'm not planning an escape. I have to pretend blah blah blah. So
Mhm.
this was a process that took months. And then I did schedule the day, like, okay, this is when I'm taking the plane. I had a whole story prepared. I had a whole story of what I was going to do. I was visiting family. I was going to come back, all this stuff. I had to repeat this story for weeks and weeks and weeks, convinced. I had to start using his tactics against himself.
Mhm.
And I was working with Archangel Michael, and I was in the middle of this whole spiritual process. I'm like, I feel like I am lying. I feel like I am doing something wrong spiritually. I am deceiving another person. And Archangel Michael kept talking about karma. No, you are now rectifying a karmic imbalance that has been going on for lifetimes. You're supposed to do this. You're supposed to do this. And then I did it, and I was on the plane, and I just started crying. I'm like, I feel free. I'm free. And then I realized, oh my God, I'm free. But then the whole the aftermath began, because after that there is the post-traumatic stress, there's flashbacks, there's the repressed memories, all of the stuff that in the moment you couldn't experience because you were in survival mode trying to escape.
Mhm.
And I started working with stuff like EMDR, bilateral stimulation sound, and started using that, and all this stuff started come, and I just cried. I had like crying for hours just with this sound on my ears, just letting the tears come out. And then I
Mhm.
started putting EMDR in my meditations for clients, started creating hypnosis journeys with EMDR infused into them so that people can actually access their deepest trauma, started researching what happens in the brain when the brain is introduced to EMDR, what actually goes on with the amygdala, stuff like that. And I created a webinar called Celestial Understanding of Traumatic Soul Contracts. And I did that with a group. And then I experienced a psychic attack from like a reptilian energy in the astral, I guess, that was not happy with the fact that I was helping other people. And I'm like, I have to start talking about this. This is all stuff that is real. And I'm not the only person experiencing this. There have to be others.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, it's nice, spirituality, meditation, mindfulness, it's all great. But there's an other side that people have to be aware of.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing all of that. We have so many overlaps in kind of like the approach. I think once we found out that something was happening, because I did the same thing with Nancy, is I pretended that I didn't know anything. I just pretended that everything was the same as it was. There was still like, because it was a mother and son relationship, I was creating like more boundaries as I was going through the awakening process. So we continued to like have space created, but it was like it felt like an undercover investigation. Like I would be at her house like having conversations with her, and she's telling me certain things that are confirming all of the memories that I'm getting in the information. And then I can't say something to her, you know, I can't say it at that point because it wasn't the right time. And so I didn't fully put that together, but I feel like you kind of laid the groundwork for me to be able to tap into that.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see how many invisible layers to existence there are
Mm-hmm.
on a global scale, but also individually in just our own individual experiences. And once people embark on the spiritual journey, they'll be like, I am discovering so much stuff about myself that I just repressed,
Mm-hmm.
or childhood stuff. A lot of people that are like, oh yeah, I had a normal childhood. I had a normal childhood. 5 years later, they've been on a spiritual journey for a couple of years. Suddenly, they're like, I was actually super traumatized and I did not realize. And I was in a very dysfunctional relationship with my parents and I did not realize. And because they've been doing this work, diving into the more subtle layers of their being, they're all of a sudden realizing that they did not actually have the perfect childhood, that they, for survival, gaslighted themselves into believing they had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. This was one of the things that happened in my ex partnership, my ex marriage. When I got married, went through that whole process, and in the process of it coming up, um it created a lot of distance between her and I because she hadn't gone into those places in herself yet and wasn't able to really face these types of things. And so I had to go head on at it. And there were aspects of that mentality where she wasn't looking at her childhood. She thought she had, you know, this great relationship with her parents. And meanwhile, she's projecting the trauma that she has with her father onto me and not noticing it and pointing fingers at me and making me feel like I'm responsible for the way that she's feeling. And so this process like really created like the pressure of like showing the cracks where the cracks were in the relationship. And it ended up actually being the thing that like rocked the boat and was like the catalyst for us kind of like spreading apart and leaving. And um it was a very beautiful relationship. We went through lots of healing together, but like you're saying, once I started accepting the depth of this relationship with Nancy, then I started seeing these patterns that were repeating in that relationship. And the finger pointing, these different types of, even if she's not aware with it, using similar like keywords and things that would come in from conversations with Nancy. And so it's like there's like a consciousness that's working through both of them. And because if one person isn't willing to face that consciousness, then the relationship's going to take its different ways and its different paths. And it was definitely the best thing that could have happened for both of us. And I feel extremely grateful for it. And it's just that revelation again of like, these patterns are happening because I have been allowing them to happen. Like I've been allowing the perpetuation of me feeling responsible for someone else's state, me feeling like I need to
Mhm.
be making choices in this way to create a secure future, all of these types of things. But really, that wasn't aligned anymore. And so the pressure and the willingness to face these invisible things, these invisible avenues, is really what allowed the thing to happen that I didn't want to happen, but ended up being the best thing to happen for me. And to be able to look back now and see the process of becoming individualized through that, and now having the relationship with my biological mother and Sophia and the divine mother, and feeling that like I'm not outsourcing that anymore to the feminine that's in my life. It's like it took getting away, getting some space, and being alone in order to reintegrate that whole aspect of my heart that had been just completely repressed, been completely shut down.
Mhm. Yeah. And I feel that's a big part of the journey too, balancing and recognizing this masculine and feminine energy in us all. We
Mm-hmm.
carry those energies. We can be our own mother and father. We
Mm-hmm.
can take care of ourselves. And I guess like a part of that lesson for me with my ex-husband was also I felt extremely betrayed. I was very naive. When I got into that relationship, I was 21. And I was like, oh, this man is going to love me forever and never cheat on me. He's never going to abandon me or blah, blah, blah. Like, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm trusting this man 100%. So I also ignore all the red flags. I'm completely ignoring them,
Mm-hmm.
rationalizing them like I did with my parents,
Mm-hmm.
which I only saw later, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And then um like right after that happened, like you said in the beginning, like yeah, I was blaming him. I said, you hurt me, you ruined my life, blah blah blah. um and he lied to me, and now I cannot ever trust another man, and blah blah blah. And then that lesson repeated itself a couple of times. I met other men who came back like on a smaller scale to present me with the same lesson. Are you still not finding your own inner masculine? You are your own protector. And then I started connecting more with that aspect of myself. And then I was at a point where I felt like I had integrated my own feminine and masculine equally. Like
Mm-hmm.
I could effortlessly switch between stepping into my masculine and feeling protected on my own. I didn't need anybody, which
Mm-hmm.
is not the same as women that grow resentful and say, oh, I don't want a man, I don't need a man. Saying, I can perfectly take care of myself, but I welcome a balanced masculine into my existence to share my life with, or whatever, doesn't matter, person. So, and then I also felt safe being in my feminine energy and not the wounded feminine that is afraid of the masculine,
Mm-hmm.
or that shuts down and puts a wall around herself. And
Mm-hmm.
we go through those experiences with these soul partners, karmic soul partners, whatever. And yeah, they're going to be traumatic, they're going to be catalysts, but they're also meant to make us see all of that so that we can find all of that within ourselves first before we go try to find it in another person,
Mm-hmm.
because then we're always going to be projecting if we
Yeah.
have not found it within ourselves. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but now when I am triggered, I will see, oh, why am I triggered by something he said?
Mm-hmm.
Let's go look within. What triggered this? What is the actual thing that caused me to react this way, because it's something within me. It's not necessarily something he said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we had the same experience just on different poles. Me needing to bring this deep like compassion and like motherly nurture to myself in order to bring that back into my space. And feeling then protection from that, feeling protection from the heart actually being open, and not just the idea of the heart being open, but the heart actually being open. And I think that's been the biggest factor for me in stepping into, like you're saying, my full power and my full sovereignty is like, you have to have those two poles integrated. You have to have the masculine and the feminine. And seeing people push into one side without acknowledging the other ever, it's creating that split. It's creating the same type of repression that we use to repress our emotions and our memories. It's the same exact thing.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. Now we can kind of segue into a more global
Okay.
scale, like how in society certain ways of interacting are being pushed, how there's an agenda to push, like you see it in the media, like watch shows on TV, movies, music, how they are trying to push this image of, you see it a lot on comedy shows, the man is like the idiot, he's like the dumb idiot, and the women are rolling their eyes, they're like, oh, he's saying some stupid stuff again. There's no real respect for the masculine, and as a result, we're gonna have men that aren't respecting women anymore. And it's almost accepted that, oh yeah, women are always nagging, the nagging woman and the lazy guy that doesn't help around the house. And then we get, oh yeah, this is just normal, this is what we should accept. No, it's an image that has been presented to you and you accept it as reality.
Mm-hmm.
I feel, because in the woman's case, it's a woman that's then very connected to her wounded side and this toxic feminine behavior of trying to manipulate, of nagging, passive aggressiveness. And I definitely did that. I definitely did a lot of that. And if I now catch myself doing that, then I'll be like, oh, I slipped up. What's happening? What is
Mm-hmm.
actually bothering me? And I will immediately communicate, like, whoa, I noticed that I went into my weird toxic side a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about this or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I will do now. But we don't see this being modeled to the younger generations. I'm not seeing that parents are talking about this to their kids. It's like kids are saying, oh yeah, your dad is whining again, your dad is complaining, oh your mom is I don't know, complaining. Go ask your mom, because I'm not gonna say anything. Yeah, like these things. I know we're getting sidetracked, but I feel it's
Oh, this
all
is
connected.
spot on. I think this is spot on because this is like the basis of why we see so many relationships fail, and the ones that we don't see fail, we see people just kind of like become acquiescent to whatever's happening, and they have no command over the state of the experience. And it goes hand in hand with the exact things that I experienced as well, because in these mind control experiments, their entire goal was with my relationship with Nancy. They removed me from my biological mother, removed her from my life, and brought me into this life where now I'm seeing this woman as the role of my mother. She's hypnotically taking on the role of my mother. And so then they start running all of these different mind control experiments that are like, it's like things where they would have her come in and do all of these different types of experiments. She would rape me. She would feed me at like 6 months old, like bowls full of brownie batter, full of sugar and cake icing, after leaving me in a state of being hungry for like 10 hours. And then they would like give her like caffeine and pump her full of caffeine, and then create milk and have me drink milk from her to get me like addicted to her to her blood and to the caffeine that was in the substance that I was getting from her. So then they would have her do really, really cruel things to me. And then after this window of experiences at about like 1.5, they would wipe my memories and put in false memories. And then they would do this again at another window. And so once I got past a certain age, it stopped with the full on cruelty and became, you're the golden child, you're my favorite child, you're like putting me up on a pedestal around everything. So they created the dichotomy and the split that was like, one, when I'm a baby, what's embedding in me is that this woman is my caretaker and she doesn't care about me at all. She actually is trying to kill me in ways. And then later on, it's the opposite. It's like she's infatuated with me, basically. And so what they were trying to do was create hatred towards her and create a complete disconnection from the truth of the feminine. And that later on in life, then they would be able to manipulate that in me psychically and make me do certain things that I wouldn't do with an open heart. And so their entire goal is to create that disconnection from the feminine because they do it from within first. They cut it from within, and then we just take on the paradigms that we observe. And so all of the violence that we see, all of the terrorism, all of these things, it's created from hatred towards a lot of times the feminine, most of the time the feminine. And that's why also we see that compared with the religion taking out the mother in all of its philosophies and presenting it with this patriarchal paradigm, because that creates more hatred also in women towards that happening. And it's splitting the psyche. It's creating more and more disconnection within all masculine energies, woman or male body. And so it's creating more and more of that split. And so I think that it's spot on that you bring this up, because this is literally what we have to get back to. It is the sacred union, and it is the synthesizing of polarity, because sacred union exists in the field of polarity. It exists in the other. And so we have to stop othering internally in order to then actually receive that and to experience that in the external life. And that's why every single therapist, when you go and see him, is going to ask you how your childhood was. What's your relationship like with your parents? Every single time, you know?
Yeah, this is definitely for people now listening, like, feel free to take a break and just sit with this for a little bit, because this is something that is so subconscious. We don't even realize that this is going on. But there is this underlying hatred, and that's such a heavy word, I know, but it is so subtle that we don't even realize it, that it's going on. A hatred towards things feminine. You see it just in what is being rewarded in this society and what is not being rewarded. The school system is all about achievements, taking action, results, all very masculine qualities. Exploration, just being, exploring, feeling, those are not being rewarded. When you do that, you're like, hey, you're daydreaming. Hey, what are you doing? You're not paying attention in class. And these are actually moments where a child is just being and allowing for things to come, where you can receive information, you can receive insights. And that stuff is being shut down right away in childhood, in the educational system. That's definitely like, and women are trying to become men almost.
Yep.
And like, that has nothing to do with how you're dressed. It has nothing to do with your sexual preference, gender identity, whatever. We all have masculine and feminine qualities. And when we lean too much into this masculine state of being, like you see the boss babes, like women, business women, blah, 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 They
Mhm.
are often so detached from their own femininity that they start to resent themselves. They want to become very masculine to be perceived as successful by the masculine society that we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like when people say the patriarchy, they say it for a reason, like, because everything operates off of the masculine function, which is, if you think about it from, you can even bring a scientific perspective, like a contraction, the control, the masculine is the masculine function, the main masculine function is achievement, is zoning in and focusing on something, and then contracting yourself into a particle in order to experience that state. And so you're constantly focusing in, trying to contract, to control. And so every single thing in the society is broken, is its control. That's the baseline foundation of everything that we are taught. Control every single thing that you are experiencing. Control your thoughts, control your job, control the way people perceive you, control the way you express. Every single thing is about control. And so, like you're saying, that is not the essence of the feminine function. The feminine function is being, it's the expanded state that is being, that is holding, that is feeling everything, that is receiving, that is giving guidance to the masculine essence to go contract and to go focus in on something and to use that
Mm-hmm.
intention to understand, to find synthesis, but then to decontract, whatever that word would be, to come back into the feminine state after that, be utilizing them continually together and not always trying to control something. Because I also think that even the concept of control has become a negative masculine connotation, because it's not necessarily about control. We can be in our full masculine expression and not trying to control things and still be able to focus in to contract and to find the nitty bitty grits of all of the information, all of the particulates about everything, and then articulate that data and express it and synthesize it. And I think this is a big aspect of what you also mentioned about women wanting to become masculine, men wanting to become feminine, and even so in the gender space. And I want to say this for a moment, that I love all people. All path choices are valid. You need to listen to what you want to experience. This is coming from a state of love. I think a lot of the desire for transgender switching is from the imbalance of the feminine and the masculine within the body, and the not understanding that we hold both of these energies, and that we've held these energies throughout time and throughout space. And so there's imbalances within these energies that don't necessarily need that type of solution in order to be fulfilled. Maybe for some people, yes, for sure. But I also have a hard time even saying that, because the ones who are, um, what word am I looking for? It's like a being that is both feminine and masculine genderly. I can't think of what that is, but they talk about how there's like higher vibrational beings who are these beings, and that's true. There are
Androgynous beings, more.
androgynous. That's, yeah, yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. And so they can hold both gender states physically in the body, and they can move between them. They can definitely do that. And so with beings that are those souls, that's naturally going to happen with their body as they move into ascended states. They're going to take on and they're going to shift dimensionally when they feel safe into more of those states. And so the transhumanism, or not transhumanism, transgender, I think they go kind of hand in hand in a way, movement is about inverting those gender roles and taking advantage of the imbalances that are within the states of children. Because there are many things that have come out that public schools and teachers actually have incentive programs to give children ideas about their gender and about having surgery and about wearing certain clothes, and they don't even have to tell the parents. Like, it's been a lot of things that are happening there. And so the way that that's able to be manipulated is because we're not understanding the dance with our own masculine and feminine energies. And I think that
Mhm.
a lot of men who transition to women, I think that they would still be very feminine and they would still express in very feminine ways. But to the extent of physically changing your body to fill what you don't know is actually going on in there, that's where it then becomes the separation, and it becomes the runaway state of being able to be an agenda that's used as a weapon, because that's really what
Mhm.
it's used, and it's used to create more divide and more confusion within the state of understanding our gender fluidity
Yeah,
and gender relationships and roles.
this is actually a very interesting topic, and a lot of people kind of shy away from it because they don't want to offend other people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important when you're listening to this to understand nobody is attacking you for your choices. And definitely, the more comfortable that you become with yourself as a person, the more that you are going to also naturally be comfortable in your body, I think.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time, I really did not feel comfortable in my feminine body.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because of past life trauma as a woman, trauma in this lifetime as a woman. When I discovered that my baby was going to be a girl, I was like, oh my God, how am I going to raise a girl? I really just wanted a boy. It would have been so much easier, I thought at the time. That was my train of thought, like, oh no, I'm going to completely fuck her up. I can't do this. Like, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Now I see how much healing it has brought that I have a daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and because I've gone through a lot of feminine healing. And the irony of it all is that by accepting more of my feminine energy, I've actually become more action oriented and stepped more into my masculine because it's more balanced. And
Exactly.
that the title of a Zoom that I did a few weeks ago was Heart Aligned Action,
Mm-hmm.
which basically encompasses the balance, heart
Mm-hmm.
aligned but action. And that's what we have to strive for. That when we do take action, when we step into this masculine aspect of ourselves, that like takes action, does things, steps out into the world, that it's from a place of heart,
Mm-hmm.
of purity.
Mm-hmm. And stepping in this space before that to understand what that even means to you, what it would mean to feel connected to your heart, what it would mean to know yourself on these deep levels, and then allowing yourself to express from there. And I think that that's just like, this also extends, I think, into transhumanism, and why I said that word, because I see is like a form of a feminine technology. It's a lunar technology. Um, it's a metaphysical technology. And so I feel a really strong feminine energy from that, and why I feel like they are able to manipulate the dark feminine through those types of technologies. And so the same thing with like transhumanism and thinking we have to merge with AI and put chips in our brain in order to tune into information. It's like, it's the same thing. It's a gender reversal. It's a problem with our root chakra. It's a problem with the safety that we hold in our root chakra, not understanding our generation, the effect of the hermetic principle of generation. And when we're doing that through the heart, our ability to just be tuned into these things because it's our natural state, and that we don't have to create these extensions because those are being created from people who have a closed heart
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the AI.
This was part one of a two-part podcast episode. It was a very long 3.5 hour episode, and that's why I decided to launch this in two parts. Part one, which you just watched or listened to, and part two will be coming out next week, so stay tuned. And if you want to make sure to receive part two in your inbox, then definitely subscribe to my Substack newsletter. You can find all the information in the description, or make sure that you are subscribed to YouTube or Spotify. Bye.